So we're in the building Bellingham studio, and it's season 3, episode 8, the finale. Paul and Ari, cold chocolate. We've been trying to make this happen for a little while, and we finally made it happen. So I'm super excited to have you guys here, and thank you for getting me chocolated up and our whole crew chocolated up. And we're gonna eat some more chocolate. We might have a drink or two, and we're gonna tell your story. So I'm super excited to jump into it. Who are you guys? How did you meet? How did you start this idea?
Fire away.
You go first.
No, you go
first. So Paul and I have always had this idealistic approach to business and what can be done with products. And we've worked in the marketing branding side of life for a really long time. And we've often, spent time thinking about how we could do it differently. And so we were on our honeymoon in India, and we were kind of trying to figure out when was the time to take the leap to do something that was kind of our own. And, what better time than when you're newly pregnant to change everything. So we
in India.
Yeah. It just felt like the right next move. So
this is it. Yeah.
So
I'm going to go back to the hotel and take a nap because I feel nauseous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had enough contacts, and we came from the natural products industry. So we had a bit of understanding about how to launch a product and had contacts to maybe help make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided that we were going to kind of launch a chocolate company that was going to be doing good into the beginning of the process.
So what is that moment like going from, so you're working for somebody else before, mm-hmm. both of you, and you had this moment of going, this was maybe more safe and secure and what I'm used to. And then you're in a different country and you have this moment going, we want to make a change in the world. We want to make an impact, right? But we also want to work for ourselves, which is like, it is totally romanticized to work for yourself. People say that it's like, you have all the time in the world. And then the reality is that maybe you have no time. Tell me about that moment. What were the emotions that you're feeling when you're like deciding to make this big pivot with your life when you're pregnant?
So for me, it was like, I can always go work more, but I won't always have this opportunity to be present for my child. And so for me, it was, or go work for someone else even. So I think that was part of the risk. And I also wanted to be a model for my kids of taking chances and following your heart. And I felt like, I think Paul and I kept bumping up against that, like internal, what would you call it? Like just reminder that like you've always wanted to do something that you created. You've always wanted to do something that you created. Like when is going to be that time? And there never really was the right time. But I think for me, being pregnant kind of in a weird way forced me to face who I wanted to be and who I wanted to be for my kids. So I think that was what pushed me over the edge. But what would you say?
The moment for me, we had different. So we like Ari was saying, we had this honeymoon in India, and we divided the honeymoon in half.
Okay.
The first half of it, we jokingly or whatever called it like a service moon. Mm-hmm. So we went and helped a group distribute vitamin A for children under 5. For like the first 10 days. So we traveled to like these really remote villages in India where it was like a bus, a dugout canoe, a 2-hour hike. And then you're in this small village that has not seen Westerners ever. And you're there to give vitamin A. So there's a small team of us. It was like 4 or 5, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're doing this and we're witnessing like the predominantly women bringing kids to these distribution sites. And when I say sites, like,
this was the school, the community school, like the one building in the community. Yeah.
Very rural.
Mm-hmm.
Very rural. And these women were bringing children, and as and some of the children weren't even theirs. And we were looking at this and we're like, man, it would be such a powerful thing to do, is to create a product, to create a company that focused on supporting women at origin, because really they're like the glue of culture. Right. They're like the things that bind and keep the world together.
Right.
And more often than not, in most companies, in most countries, they're kind of marginalized.
Right.
And they're left to do things that are outside of their dream scope. Right. They're outside of their capabilities because whatever.
So they're the glue, but they're also marginalized at the same time. There's this like absolute need for the contribution of women.
Right.
In a culture. But then there's this marginalization.
Well, because it's such a patriarchal basically in these countries, most countries, it's a very patriarchal system. And so anyways, without getting too much into the weeds there. So, we were seeing this thing and we recognized like, wow, this would be fantastic. Like it would be really cool to do this thing. And so at that point we had to realize, we had to like manifest a way to do it. So we're in India and we're like, hey, so we knew somebody that made chocolate. And
who is this person? Was this just an acquaintance? Was this someone that you had met on a bus? I mean, who is this?
It was an acquaintance, somebody that I knew, that made chocolate. And so we got back and we started asking like, hey, could you make some chocolate for us? And so we worked it out. It took a long time too, right?
Yeah, our initial thought was that he would make the chocolate and we would market it because that was kind of what we are good at and what we knew. And then we figured the rest of it would kind of, once we built the brand, we could then learn how to make the chocolate because our vision was always have the chocolate made in Bellingham and for us to be that driving that. But in order to get there, we had to like baby step it.
Right. Yeah.
I remember it differently.
Oh, so let's hear your side too. Yeah.
I mean, I think I don't.
No, this adds so much context, and we're going to get into what it means when you work with your significant other, your partner. Yeah.
No, I mean, for me, it's interesting. It's a weird dichotomy. For me, I didn't really want to make chocolate.
Yeah.
I was very interested in it. Like whenever we would go and have our chocolate made, I would go and be a part of the manufacturing process. Like I'd do a bit of it, but I didn't ever want to step back and be like and own this thing, this factory thing. Like it wasn't in like because I just felt like it was above my pay grade.
And because you'd watched maybe Willy Wonka as a kid, and you're like, Johnny Depp's kind of weird, I mean, is it too soon right now? Too soon? Sorry, Johnny. I know he listens to the podcast. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, man.
You're a big fan of yours in another dimension.
Yeah.
Pirates Caribbean High Five. But like big running rivers of chocolate. I was trying to think of like, how do you make that? You have to have water jacketed. Anyways.
Yeah.
Idealistic approach. And then Paul's like the realism of like, he would be the person physically making that happen. Cause I'd be like, cool, we're going to do this thing. And go Paul, go,
go have fun. Go have fun. Yeah. But so, we did this. And so we're very much a part of it, but not.
Right.
And then 2018, right? We decided like, let's do this.
Yeah.
So we're sitting around a kitchen table. We have a friend that was kind of, am I saying too much?
No, guiding us, like kind of being like a mentor. And we were like, F it, maybe we just make our own chocolate. Like it was that, like nonchalant.
Naive.
And then also we're like, what does it take? What do we need to get?
How hard can it be?
Yeah. That's a good question.
No, totally. And I think that like, and I will say this within the context of like this conversation for business. I almost think the more naive you are, the more fresh mind you come in, the better off you're going to be. Because I think if you really like spin the cube around and do the if this then that and answer all those questions, you could get discouraged.
Yeah.
Because it really becomes quite overwhelming. Yeah. Like when you if I knew then, what I know now, I certainly would not have ever probably done this.
And you don't want to restart it.
Well,
now that it's moving.
No, what I'm saying is like, if I knew like how the challenges, the multitude of challenges and the layers and the things that I didn't think were a part of the game.
Yeah.
If I could transport that information back, I'm not sure what 2018 Paul, or for that matter, Ari would have said. We would have been like, bring it. Cause we love getting our asses kicked.
Yeah.
We're really good at that.
We're really good at that. And we're really good at climbing mountains. I always equate us to being like the settlers that are going across country and they come to the Rockies.
Right.
Right. Our goal is California.
Yeah. And
we're coming to the Rockies and we see this big fucking mountain range.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh God, we got to get over that with our family and our wagon and all our shit.
Yeah.
And then you like muscle through it and you're traipsing through snow and you're like, yes, we did it. And you start to come down the other side and then you see the Sierra Nevadas.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, there's another one.
You're nowhere near the ocean.
You're nowhere near that.
But it's okay.
But it's okay.
It's
because
there.
you're like, we did it.
Yeah.
Like, kind of know your metal, kind of what you're made of.
Yeah.
It's almost like reframing the way you look at challenge. Like, I think now we see it differently than maybe we would have thought initially, like the sky is falling, like this thing is insurmountable. Now we're like, okay, this is the next thing we need to learn how to do. And for us to, grow as humans or grow as business people, and we see it. So we don't I don't know if it's necessarily take it as personally. Maybe it is still as personal, but we approach it differently. I think we understand now that every time, if we want to grow and if we want to expand our offerings as a business, we are going to constantly be facing that same challenge. And so we need to change how we approach it so that we can best continue to do this thing that we love to do.
So would you say maintaining a certain level of being naive, not naive, but almost like recognizing, like kind of prepping yourself, knowing that you probably will talk yourself out of stuff if you know all of the pros and cons of it. So just saying, look, this is how it was before. It worked out. I've got the right brain on my shoulders. I've got a good partner. I've got a good crew. We have all the things in place. It's not going to be easy, because if it was, everyone would do it.
Yeah.
But we're going to do it. We're going to go into it knowing there's going to be challenges, and we're going to push through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that, like, to add to that is, I think we've been across enough Sierra Nevadas and Rockies at this point that we know, for the most part, there's no challenge that's going to crush us.
Yeah.
Like we know, like, we have gas in our tank to have to work 80 hours a week. Should that be required? It's not something that, that we're going to sit back and moan about and be like, oh, working for ourselves, we wanted to do it for 35 hours a week.
And there's times we can, like, there's times when our kids have things in the middle of the day, or they need us, and we can absolutely flex our days around that. And I think that was the dream for me, is always to be able to be as present as I needed to be for them. And so I think this allows me to do both in the best way that I can imagine for myself.
And I don't ever see my kids.
And Paul works so that I can do it.
That's not true, because I saw you at Goods.
I was chasing the little bugger. That's right.
I know. And I made a joke, a really dumb dad joke, because I'm preparing for a kid. And I said, I was like to my wife, I said, you hear that siren? I think I'm getting pulled over, because I was having a beer. And then she's like, you're so dumb. And then you came over, and I didn't realize it was you. And anyways, small world.
There was a guy that was right across from you. And what did he say? That is probably the worst kid I've ever seen. What did he say?
Yeah, I think it was literally that.
I think he said that our little Bodie, our little 2-year-old, because he was a little Taz devil running through Goods.
Yeah. He's opinionated and he's fast, and so those two things in a small space with roads on either side are.
And good thing we care about what that guy thinks. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I wrote my congressman. I was offended. I
hope his beer was wrong.
Campaign to like disseminate bad information.
So I have a question for you. Yeah. So one of the things
you have a question, because you've got questions.
I think so. Now that I'm in the moment, I have no. No, I'm just kidding. I think my big question is around brand. One of the things that you've done, just aesthetically and also with your story, and how, like, now kind of getting to know the behind the scenes, how this came to be. Your branding, first of all, is what is the first thing that people see, right? Someone that doesn't know, and then they go, oh, there's a story. And I love that you've incorporated your story into your branding. Tell me a little bit more about that whole process, because brand, when people go to the store, you're not the only chocolate brand out there. There's Willy Wonka. He has his own chocolate brand, but
thought we would be,
or Nestle, or whatever you want to call it. And the whole point is that there's a lot of chocolate out there, but people know your brand because of your story. Let's talk a little bit more about that and why that story is so important for you when you started this brand.
Go ahead.
Well, it's been an iteration also, because when we started the brand, we didn't highlight the people behind the product and the people that we partner with. And I think for us, it's always been, as important as making good chocolate is making sure that we're, talking about the people that we work with. So that we needed to have a way to mesh those two. And it was kind of a big leap to put the people, because we were kind of worried that we would look like we were, what would you call it? Taking advantage of the people at Origin by showcasing them on the bar. And so we literally asked every single person, because we traveled to the Origins pre-COVID at least once or twice a year that we partner with. So we wanted to make sure to incorporate them as much as possible. And the impact that we had hoped to have, like, you'll see that on there, like, it's always been like to have a real impact. And so as we grew our partnerships, as we grew the people we worked with, we wanted to showcase that on the bars so that people knew what the growth of the business meant for our impact as a group.
And who the people were that we, trying to share that human story.
Yeah.
When we so this one, Nelfie is this one here. Nelfie is,
and that's toasted coconut for those of you listening.
Yeah, she runs an association in the DR, and we had brought a bar of chocolate for her, and so we're sitting down, and this is actually right before COVID. It was October 2019, and we were getting ready to do preparations for roasting, profile tests, and all this stuff, and we were sitting around, and I said, Nelfie, we have a gift for you, and she was like, oh, what is that? And so I said, close your eyes and put your hands out. And so she did that. And then we put the bar in her hand and she opened her eyes. And then she literally started crying. Like, she was like, wow, for the first time, I feel like I'm seen. Like, people are actually being able to know my story and know about us in a way that's amplified more than just our little microcosm of the work we do, they do. And so it was really interesting. And then after that, a lot of the other women in the associate were like, hey, I want to have mine. I want to, I want to be a part of this. Yeah. It's, and so, I think for us, it was an important part of how we share what we do and why we do it. And again, and like you said, if you're not the only chocolate bar on the shelf, like, how do you zig when others are zagging?
Right.
Like, how do you do something that might visually change somebody's awareness in a competitive set? How do you do that? It's like when we set out to first do this, like, we would walk in front of the chocolate set and close our eyes and then open them. And then really quickly you start to get a sense on color blocking, textures, images, story, but you don't know. I'm like, this is very subconscious. Like, you close your eyes and then you open them and you immediately look where your eye tracks. And then you start to aggregate color blocks. You start to aggregate shapes. You start to do these things. And so you go, okay, so it looks like there's a trend in the color blue, purple, and magenta. Stay away from that because that's going to phase out next year. So you want to move over here. So it's like, there's a lot of visual assessment that you do to try to go, like, how do we create something that's unique and yet something that's contemporary / timeless? Because those two have to work kind of hand in hand.
Right. It has to relate the customer with what it is, but also differentiate from the others. And did you ever have any weird experiences in Whole Foods where you were standing there blinking and people were staring at you because you're trying to kind of get your color blocking?
I've been somewhat kicked out of stores.
Like somewhat.
Well, you can always kind of say, oh, I'm just taking a picture for my wife because I'm, because this is, when we started this was 2014. Well, when we started thinking this through was 2014, 15. And this was like before people were taking their cell phones and taking pictures in stores. So, like, you would have to get picture, approval from the manager, and they thought that you were some competitor doing some kind of, like, anyways.
And there was some tipping point where it became okay to take pictures in stores.
Totally. Yeah. But I have been in the store, like, let's say as an example for a local store, Hagen, and somebody's shopping chocolate, and I'll be walking by and I just always checking the aisle, and somebody's there kind of like making their judgments, making their assessments, and they're kind of close to ours, and I'll be like, I heard this one's really good.
He is shamelessly promoting.
Oh, what? You should be
so shameless. And they're like, really? And I'm like, I think this one's like, and I'd be like the burnt maple, and like, I think these are great, and they're made in Bellingham. No way, they're made in Bellingham. They're totally, and they're bean to bar. Like, these are 3-ingredient chocolate bars. They're like, whoa, I had no idea. Like, do you recommend any? I'm like, this, and this, and then after a while, they're like, God, that's great. Do you buy this a lot? I'm like, my wife and I own the company. And they're like, no, really? This is so cool. I'm like, so you get a money back guarantee.
Yeah. Money back guarantee. Is that after you eat it?
Even after you eat it. Yeah.
I don't want to, we won't hold you to that. Don't worry. All right. Okay. So connecting with each one of these people, did you know these distributors, these manufacturers, these growers, pre getting into this business? Or how did you meet these people? Did you start asking questions and taking pictures in Hagen?
Yeah. Just no, I like, so, we found one group. And
where was the first country that
the Dominican Republic.
Okay. Dominican Republic. Okay.
Find one group. And then, you're meeting with them, and they're like, well, hey, listen, there's another group that is over here in this part of, Escalat in the DR. You should go check them out. So you get in your car and you drive through the jungle and try to locate them, and they're not there. And so then you go to this another place, and So eventually it's just like connecting the dots. And then it gets to the point to where, groups might start reaching out to us because they understand like what we do. And so we'll have women's groups from, various countries that might reach out, or
like through Facebook, like
as an example. Yeah.
And didn't you
all in
meet at
Spanish.
there was like a cocoa conference in the DR that you went back to, and that's where you met the Peruvian folks. They're like the government tends to get involved in trying to create opportunity, particularly for women and advancement. And so we've been able to connect with groups that way, and then also have some support with translation or with connections. And so I think that's how we got to Peru.
Right. So we at the World Cocoa Conference, I was in a meeting. I don't even know how I got invited. I crashed it. It was like with the, the Peruvian what is it? The director of agriculture. Well, it's a pretty high level people.
Sure.
Where, and then, talked about what we do. And they're like, oh, well, we'd love to have you come Peru and meet some of the groups, and we can set you up. And so it just kind of snowballs after a period of time.
And then also it's like rounding out after we understood the like flavor profile of cacao, like what our customers or different people we worked with wanted for flavors, because Peru, the Dominican Republic have certain flavors, and then we wanted to reach out to an African association, and so at that point we had enough inertia that we were able to kind of reach out. Paul knows a fair amount of people in the industry, and so we were able to reach out and kind of ask for the right contacts.
But you just one cool thing about that is that you just asked the questions and then showed up. It's like, if you talk about how simple that is, I mean, I'm not saying it's a small feat, but it's a simple move. It's just, I'm going to ask, I'm going to go test out products. I'm going to get to know it better, the education. Tell me about that process through education, because you've been eating chocolate, let's say most of your life. I think most people have, whether you eat it every day or like every week or whatever that cadence is. But then there was a certain point where you're like, okay, I have to really understand the flavor profile so I can understand what we're buying. What was that education process? Like, was it crash course MBA or in cacao, flavor profile testing? Like, how did you find the right person to learn from, or did you just teach yourself?
I think we backed into it, right? So we came into this with an intention of doing good and making chocolate, but doing good and making chocolate were at the same level. And so many people in the space that we were selling in, the craft space, they're in it for the chocolate, and they often will do good by the way that they source, because it's just the nature of craft. But I think we were like, yeah, we know what's up, like pretty early on. And we totally didn't know at all what was up. Yeah. And
was that a mantra? Like, we know what's up. You said every morning, like, you know what's up. I know what's up.
I need chocolate. Like, I need a lot of chocolate. Like, by all practical purposes, I should be an expert. And even in craft chocolate. But like the way that space, like we actually reached out to Rob from another craft maker. He owns Fresco locally. When we bought our equipment, and we're like, well, shit, now what do we do with this stuff? Like, we have this equipment here. We need to get some help getting it, like, operational and understanding it. And so we started just reaching out to people. And, I think that it's a bit of, would you say a little shishi? Like, the craft space, the people in it have like a pretty high regard for the way chocolate is made and tasted. And so it took a hot minute to like infiltrate that, because we didn't arrive at it the same way that a lot of people in this space did. I feel like, I think Paul's really good because he's great at asking questions. He's super humble. And so when he was putting together the factory, people wanted to help him because of who he is. And I think that really, at least from my side of looking at it, like, changed the way that people were willing to help us that maybe otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah. I think that we got lucky. I mean, we asked questions. We didn't know anything about it for the most part. So when, like, making chocolate is not easy. Like, it's seriously incredibly difficult to make chocolate.
2 day process.
For one bar of chocolate will take 2 days to make from start to finish. And so let's say 48 hours. So you think about, like, how hard can it be when we're sitting around the table in August 2018.
List of ingredients, and you don't need a machine.
3 ingredients.
Yeah, come on.
Let's do this. Fist bump. Boom. Let's do this.
Yeah, we got this.
And so we made the decision in August, and we had to get a factory up and running by December.
So we bought in enough product to hold us over while we made the transition from the co-packer essentially to making it ourselves.
Right.
And what was enough product at that time?
Well, not enough.
Oh, okay.
So I don't even know.
50,000 bars.
Yeah,
or
50,
something
60,000
like
bars.
60,000 bars?
Yeah.
60,000. How many bars could fit in this room? Like, what does 60,000 bars look like?
So let's say 4,000 bars fit on a pallet.
Okay.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So by 8, 16 times 4 is 24, 84,000. Did I get that right? 64,000. So 16 pallets.
So we have one extra pallet in here. Right. So one additional pallet. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, 64,000 bars.
That's a lot of chocolate.
Yeah.
And that was not enough chocolate.
And that was not enough chocolate. So no, so like when we going back to this question.
Yeah.
Like well, whatever. It was more of a sense. It was more of a feel that you're emitting out there, which is like
a vibe.
What your vibe?
Yeah, just give off a vibe.
I was just emanating. It's like like doing this,
yeah.
right? Going back to being naive, going back to thinking that like, okay, we can do anything, and not in a superhero kind of way, just more like a chop wood carry water way.
Mm-hmm.
Like
good book.
What's that?
It's a good book.
Yeah. Is if you just, I always talk about the Finding Nemo movie, the Dory swimming thing, the swimming fish. Just keep swimming. Literally every single day, I wake up and I tell myself to just keep swimming. Just put my foot in front of the other and figure it out. Because eventually it's going to resolve. In between that pathway, there's 27 moments of panic.
Yeah.
Right? The panic isn't not there. It's like, wow, you're super confident.
Yeah.
No, it's just that like I tamper that down so nobody can see it.
Yeah.
Except for Ari. Ari sees it frequently.
Yeah.
And you just chop wood, carry water because you got to hydrate and stay warm, right?
You
got to do it. There's no choice. Especially now that we're a family and we're making this business, there's no plan B. There's no parachute. And I think that also helps. It like puts you in a space where you don't have that suitcase packed under the bed. So like if the relationship ain't working out, you just grab it and jam.
Yeah.
Like it's like you're in this.
Yeah.
We're committed. So when it came to this time to where we're like sitting around the table and saying, how hard can this be? Let's do it. And we had 4 months to do it. Like nothing existed.
Yeah.
We didn't have space. We didn't have the money for the equipment. We didn't have the know-how. We didn't know what to buy for equipment. Like we didn't know anything. And we had to get a factory up and running in 3.5 months that was organic certified by the USDA.
And make chocolate.
So by January 1, we could keep our product flowing into distribution.
Because at that point we were in Whole Foods. We were in 500.
400 or 500 accounts.
Yeah.
So but the big question is how, so you have all this, the production side of it and the background and the connection to the source and the people and like the story and everything's there. But then there's the consumer on the other side, whether the story's there or not. Like someone might connect deeply with the story and eat the chocolate as a byproduct, or that might be the vice. One way or another, they're going to stumble into both of those, right?
Yeah.
So how did you find customers? Who is your customer? How did you find them? Was it like, hey, word of mouth in Bellingham, or was it like marketing online? Was it direct to, Whole Foods? I mean, how, like, or Hagen, or these types of bigger box stores? Like, what was your plan? How did you do that? How did you sell?
Well, so there's a distributor called UNFI.
Okay.
They're the largest natural distributor in the country. And so we had a friend who worked there, and he made a couple phone calls and connections to get me a meeting with the head buyer back in Rhode Island. So I'm talking to the guy on the phone. His name is David Lobby. And he said, and this is 2016. He was like, yeah, sure. This is great. I'd love to meet you. How about next Tuesday? And this is like Thursday. And I was like, cool, I'm there.
Yeah.
So I get a plane, fly out there, make the pitch. Now, the way that it works with distribution is that you have to have retailers, which are, I guess, an industry called doors. You have to have doors that want to bring you in. So you go to the retailer and like, hey, I've got this great product. You go to their buyer and they're like, cool. Are you distributed? And you're like, no, we'll go get distributed and come back. You go to the distributor and you're like, hey, I want you to carry my product. They're like, do you have doors? You're like, not yet. Yeah. Because the doors are asking for, so you have to play this game. And so you're trying to convince everybody that you're good enough.
Yeah. Did you get your door? Did you get the door first?
We got the distribution first.
Distribution. Okay.
So I left the meeting. He goes, yeah, I'll give you 2 distribution centers. I left the meeting, went outside, called Ari, and I'm like, you're not going to believe this. We just got 2 DCs in the Pacific Northwest.
Which means we were going to be distributed basically West Coast.
Yeah. And had they who tries the product? Was it all based on the numbers and the pitch, or was and the story and the social good element, or was it? Are you sitting in this boardroom and you're like, here's our maple bar, here's our toasted coconut, here's our like,
yeah.
What is that experience?
Yeah, I mean it's a it's a half and half, right? Yeah. I think it's story. Story is the first thing, or as we sometimes call it, the tiebreaker.
Yeah,
but flavor is really at the end of the day. Go ahead.
And I think like it just depends like where we are on the shelf. Like for a Whole Foods customer, they might not have a lot of, they have the endangered species and a couple of like social enterprise brands to choose from. And we really felt like we could take it a step further and like really humanize the chocolate making process and the workers that do, the growing, the harvesting, the processing of the beans before they get to us. And so that was our hope, is to kind of be that step above the sort of whitewash. And I'm using that word like very loosely, but like that doesn't necessarily have the story. And so that was our hope, was to fill that gap in the marketplace. And what we found is that it was interesting. We weren't quite craft. We weren't quite like the $7-10 super small batch folks. And we also weren't the Theo, Theo's massive compared to us. And so we were trying to operate in a space that I think consumers weren't quite sure who we were, what we were about, wouldn't you say? We were almost more expensive than the everyday bar, but not as expensive as the craft.
Although you're producing a craft quality.
Yes.
The difference between craft, the difference between the two a little bit?
Oh, you put me on the spot here. No, I don't. You're just going to be straight up and say no. Do I have to drink for that?
Yes.
We'll get to that. Cool.
Craft is craft. So craft's when you roast, when you make your chocolate from scratch. Industrial chocolate is where you buy liquor and you make it in large, substantial
vats.
And so, craft is a lot more intention, takes 2 days, things like that. Like you're hand selecting beans. There you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is so we can have another if we so choose. Cool. Perfect. So keep going. I'm sorry about that.
So craft yields a premium.
Right.
So anyways, we were in this kind of, what do we call it? No man's land?
Yeah,
no man's land.
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Interesting.
So so you gotta know your lane. That's the one thing that we learned. Is you gotta know your lane, you gotta own it.
And we had kind of a crisis of like who we were. Like, are we craft? Do we want to go be all in on craft, or do we want to go all in on
let's call it mass?
Yeah, and that is one of our most recent
therapy sessions.
Yeah, right. Because it's like we want to, like, Paul really knows. Cheers. Cheers to that.
Therapy. Yeah. Therapy's good for the soul.
Amen.
So we thought, okay. That's delicious.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was, so what we recognized is we kind of had to ping back, because Paul is pretty well, a lot of people in the craft space, and he really likes that group of people. It's a really solid group of humans. That are doing great work. And so we're trying to figure out, like, can we do both? Can we kind of hybridize, because we're interested in both, this idea of creating chocolate at scale, because what we found is that's our mission. Our mission is to create the largest impact. And so the more beans we buy, the more is directly relational to the amount of people we can work with. And that's the end. That is, for at least for me, and I think for you as well, like the bottom line of what we're trying to do here is create impact. So we might not do that selling $7, $10 bars of chocolate, a dozen a week.
Narrows your market. Yeah.
Yeah. But if we, and what we've recently recognized when we took the next leap that we have recently taken, which was buying a chocolate chip machine, is there's a huge market for a sort of craft chip for business to business. So it's fine. So that also is a really cool way to align to other businesses that are doing good work, or in our community that use chocolate chips. So we've been able to really expand our would you say, like our community that way? Scope
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is just allows us to make a lot more chocolate.
And you also have, like, you can inform, like, so going back, that you were asked that question about education consumers, right? It's hard, when your product's at the shelf and there's nobody there to speak for it, right? You hope this front thing tells a story enough that it compels somebody to pick it up. But, you know, the reality is it's 3 to 5 seconds. And most people align to what they already know. So if they already are familiar with endangered species or whatever that is on a shelf, Lynn, whomever that is, they're very seldomly going to jump outside of that comfort zone, because at the end of the day, our most important asset is time, right? So when we're shopping, you're hustling to get from here to home. You've got 23 minutes to get to the store. And so you're just like grabbing stuff. You might not even be looking.
You're
autopilot, right? Yeah. But in this sense, so we don't have the ability to influence decision-making at the shelf. But when we start, like Ari was saying, when we're starting now to work with other businesses, we can create an influence based on what we make and why we do it. And now we're having pretty, decent sized companies coming to us and saying, hey, we love what you do and we love what you make. Can you make some for us?
So almost a licensing.
Just more like an ingredient, right? And so what Ari is saying is like what we had, the not the existential crisis. That's an over generalization. But like for us, we were really attached to the brand. Like we felt like the only way we succeed is through brand. And for a lot of companies, that's true. But when we were to like sift through the intention of why we do what we do, it comes down to how to create impact. Doesn't matter what face it wears. Doesn't matter what clothes it wears, right? If you go through the eras of 70s, 80s, and 90s, and you're that same person, you're wearing different clothes, but you're the same person, right? Like we're the same person doing the same work, but we might facilitate that work through another company. And they may be buying 10,000 pounds of chocolate from us a month. Well, that's a substantial amount of impact that some people at Origin would only sell a year. That's like 5 metric tons of cocoa. That would be a huge amount for some small producers. Like to say every single year or 3 times a year, we're going to purchase 15 metric tons from your small little cooperative or your association. They can count on that.
It transforms communities. Like it allows for education and healthcare in a way that.
And that's the thing that we're recognizing. Like, wow, if we scale a little bit, we can do impact in a way that may have looked different from the onset. Like the onset was brand. Well, it's still brand, but it's not the way that we had initially set out to be. And I think we are becoming really okay with that. Like we still have cool and we still do this.
We always will, and we'll launch different bars and work with different, retailers. We sell on Amazon. We always try to get the product out, as well as we can, and as many places as we can. But like for us, the real focus where we want to spend our energy is on the impact, which means we are looking to sell at scale, and partnering with other businesses has been awesome.
So far,
because so far, like people really, I think, are looking for transparency in supply chain. They're often finding that they're not getting it from the people that they're buying from. And so the thing that we love to do is something that turns out people are looking for. And so that's been
that's an asset.
Yeah, a really cool experience to.
And so talking about supply chain, I don't know if this is boring and in the weeds, but like we're in a crisis right now, right? Globally, we're in a supply chain crisis for many tiers of goods. And when you have really good, solid relationships with the people you work with at Origin, you get better prices. So direct trade is a model that we practice, which means we buy directly from growers, and direct trade means that we pay them directly. So it goes from our bank account to their bank account. It doesn't go through an intermediary.
So that would be fair versus fair trade, meaning that it's. Tell me a little bit more, just as a comparison to fair trade.
Organoleptic.
Organoleptic.
-2.
-2.
Okay.
Yeah, allow it. Play on.
Do you want to?
No, please.
No. Well, fair trade's a process and a model that allows farmers, growers, processors as well at Origin to get a fixed price. So let's say currently right now, I believe it's $2,600 a metric ton. Let's say the global cocoa market right now, a metric ton might be $1,900. So it's a $700 premium for that. And that's standardized. So that's the base. You can't purchase cocoa any less than that. So the farmers can know minimum my yields are going to represent $2.60 a kilo. I know that's what I'm going to get. And they can start to frame their production, growing, future casting, all that stuff around there. But still at the end of the day, they sell their cocoa to another company. So they're
holds the certification for fair trade.
The fair trade.
Got it.
Because most farmers aren't fair trade certified independently They're in a cooperative or within a group grown under some master certificate.
Got it.
So like if you're a farmer and you grow cocoa and you grow cocoa for ZZZ whatever, and then I come to you and I say, hey, can I buy some of your cocoa? Yeah, you can buy it, but it's not fair trade. It has to go through that. So that means that they're taking the premium that I would have paid you.
Makes sense.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
Okay. So for us, we're a fair trade certified importer, so we can a lot of times bypass those, pay directly. It just creates more financial impact. And so going back to the supply chain thing, because we have these relationships, we're not beset by the same constraints that some other companies might be. Like there's a lot of companies in the space that are struggling to find ingredients. But because now we have better buying power, we have we have really solid relationships. It makes it easier for us. And plus we can produce at a volume that many other, let's say, mid-sized companies might not be able to do. So all of those things, it's a weird thing to say, but I think that COVID has been, I don't want to say beneficial, but the supply chain it hasn't impacted us negatively.
The same way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I just learned more about, fair trade, direct to origin. Is that correct?
Direct trade.
Direct trade, fair trade, direct trade. Got it. Okay. Let's talk about the mask, the brand. You talked about it being the clothes that you wear. It is a very powerful brand. And how did you land on Cool? Cool. Yeah. But how did you land on it? Where did you stumble on the word? Because it's a Mayan word, right? Yeah. How did you choose that to represent the story, the impact that you were wanting to have?
The straight story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
We probably got like 7.35 minutes.
Okay. Our first name was Bija.
Okay.
And when we launched, and that was with a partner, and when we got to the decision to make our own chocolate, that was not something we could continue to do together. Like the person we were working with wasn't interested in that. And so we're like, cool, no big deal. We're going to just rebrand ourselves, because how hard can that be, right? Like,
like find a new brand name.
No big deal, right? People do that all the time. Brands do that, and then are very successful in that transition. Okay, that was a joke. They don't. It's a bad idea. But so what happened is
hold on. The backfill it.
Peter.
No, backfill it further.
Okay, go ahead. You backfill.
I'm not gonna step over. I'm just gonna say one thing. So we did a lot of trademark research. Came up with a ton of names.
Yes.
We had our trademark attorney parse through names like a freaking Vitamix.
And it got pretty
like Leo chocolate. And
totally.
Leo Cohen chocolate. Yeah.
We trademarked both of those.
Don't even try to get it.
Done.
Damn. All right.
And it's got your picture on it.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
So
nothing was available.
And we had this friend who had made a chocolate called Cool in Minnesota and had shut down his factory. And so Paul reached out to him and was like, and it actually so Bija means, why am I spacing what Bija means? It's like I blocked it out.
Oh, it's the seed.
Past. Yeah.
The seed and origin of life.
Right. The origin. And then Cool means the interconnectivity between all living things. So it really was still in the vein, and even maybe more so than what
evolution.
Yeah, an evolution. And we felt like, well, this really actually works. And even though it already existed, maybe we can take it and grow it from there.
Make it our own. So yeah.
That's when you called Peter.
So I called
Peter.
I'm like, Peter, what are you doing with Cool? I'm shutting it down. He had got a health crisis, and so he was shutting it down. And I said, I'd love to buy it from you, because getting a trademark and then getting everything built out and baked out to that is tens and tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars. And he said, sure, I'll sell it to you. And I said, what do you sell it to me for? And he gave me a number that was ridiculous.
It was like $1,500. What was it?
No, it was 10,000.
Okay, sorry.
Which is
very low, probably. Yeah.
Well, but then you get all the molds, then you get all the files, then you get all the customers. Like, I mean, you get the trademark, you get everything. It was like a package deal. And so that's where we were like, okay, now we're not Bija anymore.
Yeah. Did that take a minute or?
Took 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Oh, you
sat
on it too long. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, and then going back, okay, be mindful of time. This is going back to, business pains, bumps, bruises. We were Bija in distribution.
500 stores.
Tons of product in distribution as Bija. Well, Bija's no longer. So we had to migrate to Cool, create the brand, get it into distribution, and we had to buy back all the inventory of Bija because it's guaranteed
off the shelf and off distribution.
Oh my
which
goodness.
was what, $35,000.
Yeah.
We had to pay $35,000 to buy back our own product.
And then donate it to probably saw it all over the community that year.
Yeah,
We were everywhere.
we gave
Wow.
like 1,200 bars to the school district, but that was very painful. And that was one of those oops things where you're like, I didn't have 35,000 just sitting around. So
you can't plan ahead for that. That's one of those things you're like part of the vision and part of creating impact. And one of the things that I align with very much is focusing on creating value and providing value before you take payment. So it's how can I provide value or education or impact on a community or multiple communities? And the decision-making process gets easier and easier. And one of the things that you said earlier that was super interesting to me is you're like deciding if you're going to be, the big box producer, or you're going to be like the craft super, what is it called? The craft $7 to $10 bar chocolate. And the mission and impact behind the brand guided that decision. And it made it easy, even because it's you can go either way and be successful.
Yeah.
You can be McDonald's and be successful, or you can be the steakhouse and be successful. Right. So tell me a little bit more how the vision and the mission has guided decisions and made those easy for you.
Would you say? I mean,
we're looking at each other like crickets.
It is. It's totally. It is easy. It's not. Well, it's easy to make the decision. It's not easy to then actuate it, because I think we made the decision really quickly. But then to then actuate that into the world, or to shift how we work or who we work with, and for where our energy goes, that took a lot longer. I think for us to get behind that, because we have come to know ourselves as a certain way, and even though that's where I think that's where all the energy was in this other way of doing things. And we were fighting against it because we saw ourselves a certain way. And it wasn't until it was when we saw ourselves differently that allowed us, it really opened up everything, I think, in terms of who we work with, how we do things.
Right. The possible, I think to add to what you're saying is like, we had our gaze to scale, we had our gaze down, and we were like, this is us. And it wasn't until we kind of lifted our eyes up and looked spatially outward to think we can be so much bigger than we've been boxing ourselves in. And I think we were boxing ourselves in such a way that we were so hung up on, let's go back to this thing, the brand, or how we are. The mission always drove things. That was always critical, but we were like, how do you hold that nexus, that thing that's so critical to the core? But then how can you tilt your lens up a little bit and just pan out? And then once we started to realize, like, we can make this any way we want, and we don't need to tie it to chocolate bars. It can be tied to selling to another company. The mission's still being achieved. Let's not be so hung up. Let's not let our egos get attached to this. Like
it has to be the brand. It has to be bars on the shelf. It has to be distribution nationwide. It has to look like that.
PR about your brand and your mission. Like really, it's immaterial, because really the work is the work. Like we're setting out to create a company to try to do good. That's the work. If it's featured on the Today Show or if it's not,
which ironically we were, and
congratulations.
It didn't translate into what you would have expected, right?
Okay.
So you think,
still congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a really fun experience, but I think like one would think that was then the tipping point to all of this, success or whatever that looks like. But we found that like it's really people to people, as opposed that we've gotten there, and that really emulates our business model, right? It has always been the people. It has always been people, and so it would make sense. It's going to be the people that get us to, align with us to achieve what we're trying to do. I think.
And I read a number that was 1 million chocolate bars. And if you were to take that number, and that to me, we just calculated 64,000 chocolate bars and my mind's blown. We're talking about impact, how chocolate bars equal impact on these communities, and buying direct from origin, or direct, what is it called again? Direct trade, but from origin. What does that look like for the future? What does 1 million chocolate bars do for a community? What is 10 million chocolate bars? What does this open up if you can scale? And what are your goals for scaling this?
this is like the new hot, like we are literally trying to get our heads around around this, because some of the companies that have been coming to us are so big, like billion-dollar companies, that we quite literally are shitting our pants, but also like recognizing like, whoa, like we could create actual production facilities in country. And man, then we could employ hundreds of people. We could go from hoping to, be able to provide healthcare and education and, consistent, nutrition, to really creating like profound impact on massive amounts of people around the world. And so,
way beyond our initial scope.
Yes. Like blowing our minds as to what's it possible. And I think honestly, I've always been like, we can, if we just have the tools, if we just work hard and have the opportunity, we're going to do something. And I think this is the first time I'm like, okay, all the 5 years of hard working our asses off, the 5 years of recommitting is finally feeling like, oh, wow. Like
some critical mass, tipping point.
Yeah. Like, so just to give you a number, like, so last year, I think we produced about 30 metric tons of chocolate. So that's 64,000 pounds of chocolate. This year, I think we're going to over double that easily. Maybe 3 to 4.
How many chocolate bars is that?
I don't know. See, that's the thing. It's like we don't measure in chocolate bars anymore because that's where we were.
We're like Pablo Escobar of chocolate bars.
Totally.
Yeah.
We're going to Medellin. Chocolatero. Yeah, totally. I mean, it's just like, again, it's like thinking about scale.
Yeah.
Like scale is the thing that it will literally, fingers crossed, is going to shift the way that we do. Because if somebody came to us 2 years ago and was like, hey, we want you to make 100,000 pounds of chocolate, we're like,
us? Yeah.
Is that real?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Right now, the answer is yes. And then we go back behind closed doors and we're like, how do we do this?
Yeah.
That's the thing that's different for us, is we're like, we can do this.
We see ourselves differently now.
Yeah.
Because we've gone through.
But it's hard.
So Bellingham, it's the coolest part about what we get to do here with this podcast is that there's a lot of companies that are just nestled, and you guys used to be down below Civic and have moved recently, right?
Yeah.
And there was obviously a reason, partial reason for that, but due to the flooding that was going on, that's kind of like when we first started all of us talking. Right. But you're in Bellingham, and of all places, and this is a huge global impact that you're making. Why are you in Bellingham? What about the Bellingham community draws you to be here and have a beer goods and support other local businesses? What about Bellingham is your place?
Man, this is I couldn't think of a better place to have
raise a family.
Totally, to have a family and to raise children and
access to the mountains.
Community, yeah. Outdoor activities like the mountain, but like having a community that really represents the types of values that we want our children to embody. Commitment to their civic responsibilities, their passion for making and evolving the world. Like Bellingham seems to really represent that. And so thinking about going somewhere else, I don't know. I mean, and like Ari was saying, like we go to the mountains, we can go mountain biking, we can get in the water, there doesn't seem to be a better place.
Yeah.
And to kind of wrap up this season 3 finale, you have your kids, right? And didn't meet, but I got pulled over by your kid at Goods with his fire truck. I was very paranoid that day. But you have lessons that you had talked about earlier on that you want to pass along to them by who you are, the example that you set, by taking chances, by scaling, by making impact in your community, and the flexibility, showing your kids that you can create your own thing. If you could give a message to your kids in the future, maybe they stumble upon this on TikTok or whatever the younger kids listen to. Yeah, the archives, the Building Bellingham archives in the future.
Is it a new social media in 2030?
There's a new one. It's called Blick Blick. I like it. So on Blick Blick, you find find the Building Bellingham podcast. What's the message you want to leave for your kids?
Good.
Why do you do this?
I mean, I think that Ari's better at this than I am, but I'll just say one thing. I think that like empowering people to realize that like every decision choice has an impact, and that impact can have a rippling effect that we may not be able to see. And so when you do something, like you put your heart into it, you put your soul into it, you try to do it with the best intention, and to be able to ideally teach our children that like we can put our efforts into something that is going to create a positive ripple effect, is a powerful thing to share, as well as like I would tell them as a little asterisk, like become a kick-ass problem solver. Like don't be afraid to fucking solve problems. Like really get good at it, because that's going to get you over the Sierra Nevadas, and that's going to get you, you know, that's going to get you to manifest anything you want. Just get good at it.
Yeah,
I think.
And I think like following, and I know it sounds really cliche, and there's a lot to unpack around following your dream, but like really truly like being willing to go after what makes you inspired, or what you're passionate about. Because I think that, you know, probably for the first time in our lives, even though we work more and we're, you know, our kids would see us work a lot. We talk about work a lot at home.
Except for after 6 o'clock.
We don't get to talk about it anymore.
I like that.
6 o'clock.
Good rule.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
And so I think that like, I think for them to see that like this is ingrained in who we are, this business is kind of who we are as people, like, exemplified. And we want to see them to see us working hard, you know, facing challenges, arguing about stuff at times, and then coming through, being able to come through that together is a really powerful thing for them to see, and for them to see us like, you know, going after something we care about. Sorry, this happens every time, but like, I really think that it's hard to do. It's hard to take a chance on yourself. And so I think it's always worthwhile. It's always worthwhile to go for it. And so I would hope that they would do that themselves. Yeah.
Mic drop. Season 3.
Yeah.
Boom.
For the tears.
Episode 8. What's that?
Does tears ever happen in here?
I cry after every episode.
So glad
and
that's
before.
done.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
so glad
it
that's
happens.
done.
It always happens.
No, but thank you so much for joining us. I couldn't think of a better way to finish this season, and we're canceled until next season officially. And on that note, thank you so much for joining us in the studio. Yeah. We got Paul and Ari Newman with cool chocolate.